Everyone, my name is Carissa Inglis. I'm the Service Support Manager for Queensland Foster and Kinship Care, and I have Margaret and Lisa in the room, who are both case officers here at QFKC. And we have, of course, our wonderful presenter, Gregory, who's here to do the last of the 6 series that we've had. I do want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we all respectfully meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. We have had a bit of an issue with the second of the 6 series, getting it up online, but I can announce today that we have fixed all technical difficulties, and so when we upload today's one, we will also upload number 2, which means number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 will all be on there. Can I please encourage people that are online today and have managed to attend all of them to speak to your fellow carer friends and agency workers and let them know that they can actually access those trainings through our website, because they're just an incredible resource and we just want as many carers knowing about it as possible. I just need to talk about a couple of housekeeping duties before we move on. Microphones are disabled at the moment. Gregory will let us know if he's wanting us to enable them at particular times. There will be an opportunity at the end of today for questions, so please know that we do want to hear from you, and yeah, there will be that opportunity. But just also mindful that this is going on our website, so we can't, we need to be very mindful of confidentiality and not naming any specific names or identifying information. So we just need to be very general in the questions that we ask. Now the chat function is enabled, so if you've got questions and you're not wanting to speak out loud or wait till the end, you can certainly put those questions in the chat function. Again, just being very mindful of confidentiality and, excuse me, being very general in what you put into that. So today, the last series of 6, and the practice of rhythm, a framework for caring. And can I just say that I've been a social worker for over 20 years, and every time that I come to one of Gregory's trainings, I take something away. And there was one thing that he said at a recent training that really resonated with me, and I went back to Brian and I said to Brian, oh my goodness, I can't believe I haven't thought of it like this. And that is, Gregory, the conversation about respite or short care and the narrative that we tell our children. So rather than saying to our children, I need respite, you're going away for the weekend, I need a break from you, that the narrative involves a conversation with the adults who are going to have the child around, look, this is what we're going to say. We're going to say, you really want to have the child for the weekend. And I'm going to say, George and Sarah would really love to have you for the weekend. Would you like to go? And then when George and Sarah come to pick up the child, or you drop the child off, George and Sarah say, I'm so pleased that you said yes to coming to my home, and just that different experience for that child. So after working in the industry for so long and just hearing that narrative in a different way, it just was something that will always stick with me. So thank you, Gregory. I always take something away, and I'm really looking forward to today. I will pass it over to Gregory and look forward to the session today.
Fantastic. So the first thing I need to do is turn my camera off and then share my screen, because I will, if all goes well, I will appear. Oops, I've frozen. Hey, I'm back again. Hello, everybody. It's good to be here. And why are we all here? Because we want to create hope, healing and change for children who go through our care system. And I hope you're of the belief, because I certainly am, that every child has a right to feel safe and to thrive. For those who don't know me, I'm a consultant psychologist. I'm founder of Australian Childhood Trauma Group, and I'm wearing that hat today. So welcome. Now, hopefully my technology works, and every time I go to a slide, I should appear somewhere. So think of it as, where's Wally? I have been known to be called Wally from time to time by people who are displeased with me. But today we're going to talk about the practice of rhythm. Now, for the Catholics out there, and I do apologise, you've probably heard of rhythm, but it's not that rhythm I'm talking about. This is a framework for caring, and each of those letters in the word rhythm are going to mean something. And if you can hold in mind this word rhythm, then the outcomes for children in care will be very much improved. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm sitting on today. That is the Wurundjeri people of the Great Kulin Nation. Pay my respect to elders past and present, and those who may be elders into the future. And I'd like to welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who have come into the training today, and thank you for allowing me to be in this wonderful country. So the journey so far, as was said, 6 events. Well, we've had 5, and this is the 6th one. The first one was Mad, Bad or Sad, and that was a pathway to healing for carers, and this was kind of setting the scene around what we needed to do. But one of the big takeaways that I mentioned was the important point. See, I talk too fast sometimes. I get so excited about this stuff. I have to slow myself down. But the important point I think I made on that day was that we need to change seeing behaviour as good or bad, and rather see all behaviour, whether it looks good or bad in your own eyes, but simply see it as communication. If a child's feeling good inside, then you're going to see very clear communication, and they'll tend to follow instructions. If a child's got stuff bubbling up inside themselves and they're not feeling so great, then the chances are you may see behaviour that isn't meeting expectations. They may swear, curse, throw stuff at you, withdraw, be oppositional, and so forth. But if you simply say to yourself, what is the child trying to communicate? And at that point, allow yourself to try and meet the need of the child, then better outcomes. Second session was getting started, preparing your body and mind to care. And my argument there, of course, was saying that if you're not ready inside yourself, if you don't understand yourself in terms of your own sort of physical and psychological and spiritual makeup, it's going to be hard for you to be available for children who have experienced adverse childhood experiences. So the takeaway for that was about grasping hold of the notion of daduri, breathe, listen deeply, not just to what's out there, but listen deeply to what's happening to you inside. Connect. Above all else, we must connect with children. That is, form an attachment, a relationship. And remember that change takes time. You can't hurry the river. I am going to finish today with Taduri again as part of the rhythm process. So we then went on to joining together, how relationships form with children who do not trust adults. And the big takeaway for me was building relationships takes time. Therefore, do not expect children who have been harmed to trust you quickly or at all. Just because you've opened your house to them, don't expect they're going to come and say, oh, thank you so much. What a wonderful house. I'm going to look after it. In fact, maybe I'll come out each night and do some dusting and vacuuming for you. More likely they'll come out and throw paint or draw on the walls or break things and so forth, or not want to be there. Don't take it personally. We then followed up with environments for change, creating a healing environment free of shame. And I introduced Judy Atkinson's model of the circle of shame, that often with children who've experienced harm, shame is at the core of that experience. And that's why we see these very challenging behaviours, because children often feel that if they had been better, then their parents or other adults would not have done the things they did to them. So therefore it's their fault. And we want to shift this experience. And finally, the last session was what to do and when to do it, turning a bad situation. That's Matilda, by the way, behind me. She's come up to join in the session. Turning a bad situation into a positive outcome. And the takeaway was, before you do, make sure you understand what the child needs and focus your intervention on meeting that need. I was saying that so often we just get into the doing mode. A child's crying, oh, I've got to do something, I've got to stop them crying. It might be just more important just to sit with the child and allow them to cry. And wait for a moment where they're ready. And one of the things I talked about is this idea is that we want to get children back in their thinking mind before we do anything. Remember, thinking mind, reptilian brain. This is when children can't do much thinking. Therefore, it's really important for you, before you do anything, if a child of yours is kind of out there, is being destructive or is withdrawing, before you put an intervention in place, just help them to return to their thinking mind. So today, We're on our way. What are we going to do? I'm going to introduce you to rhythm, regulating emotional states, homely environments, yummy food, therapeutic change plans, healthy body, mind, and spirit, and maintaining the rhythm. So all you have to hold in your mind is rhythm. And you have an absolutely sure way of improving the outcomes of young people by just doing these things. Of course, it's a bit harder than that, but we will get to it. And the reason I chose the word rhythm is not just because all those things fitted in there, is that adults in the spaces that children inhabit must set the rhythm. You create the energy in the space. If you are calm, if you are confident, and if you are empathic and compassionate, then that rhythm will mean everybody else is going to kind of get into that sort of space. Of course, it takes time. And the thing I have to tell you is love is not enough. It's only a start. It's important we show unconditional love to these children, but love on its own is not going to provide healing. And for some carers and workers, this can be really hard to fathom, because we open up our houses to these children, our homes to these children, and the belief if we show love, somehow that will get them into a better place. I'm here to tell you it's not enough. In fact, it's a silly thing we think about. If you imagine a child lying in traction in a hospital, sort of repairing some breakage of bones that have occurred, you've probably not seen nurses coming up to them going, love, 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 and then they've stood up and walked away. It doesn't happen like that. They show their love in their work and compassion, but they do a lot of other things in order for that child to mend from their broken bones. And in the same way, we need to understand with children in care, there's much more we need to do in order to get them just to be just like their peers. In other words, if we were to look at the key developmental milestones of their peers that have not had a care experience, and the child who has had a care experience, they should be equal. We should get them. But normally when kids come into our care, they've missed a lot of developmental milestones and they're not meeting the same expectations as their peers. And we need to even that up, and we can do that through rhythm. It's a framework for caring. So a framework means we're going to put something around the child that's going to hold them. But it's not only just going to hold them, this framework is going to be able to be put around us as carers and workers, so that we have some foundation to hold on to in order to do the work. And it's called rhythm. I want you to remember that, rhythm. Think of it as a beat, but you set it based on the things that you're going to do moving forward. And based on all the things we've talked about in your bag of tools, all those 5 sessions we have to date, all those things go inside your bag of tools, and you can pull those out in order to put in place a rhythm. So let's start. Regulating emotional states. Now, the big question, of course, is why is being able to regulate your emotions important? So this is when you turn your microphones off and you talk to me and I'm listening. Why is it important for us to be able, us as adults, but also for children, to be able to regulate emotional states? And what does it mean to regulate our emotions? And if things go in the messaging, if somebody messages, I can't see that at the moment, so I'll get somebody to read that out who can. But turn your microphones off. I'm not moving on until somebody tells me the answer to this question.
We've enabled your microphones now, so people should be able to speak.
Anybody there? Somebody? Does that mean nobody knows why we need to regulate our emotions, why it's important? I'll start picking on people. I'll say, what about that person? I can't see you.
We've got a couple of people that have put into messengers. So
Yes.
Michelle and Jack have said it's saying, hang on, sorry, I can't access audio function from PC.
What is this?
What was that?
So Tamara has
Yeah.
said so we can help children co-regulate. It's still saying that, let me just,
Well, people's microphones are still on, so you might be talking, but I can't hear you.
okay. Go down.
We have a technical hiccup. Excuse me.
Allow mic, here we go.
Oh.
I think we've got to save it then. Okay. Sorry, people. This is what happens when we don't have our tech person here. But
We were
yeah.
placing dispersions upon your good characters, saying that nobody has an answer. So hopefully here you
we
go.
enabled, but we didn't save it. So that is our mistake. So you should be able to talk now.
Okay.
Yay.
Why is being able to regulate emotions important? Anybody?
No.
So that we can actually see the communication in a different light and not from a place of fight flight mode, and be able to regulate them according to how we are regulated.
And regulate them. Tell me what that means. Regulate them.
Well, if you're coming from a place of anger and pain and as if they're coming out to attack you, you're not going to have a response that is going to be helpful. It's going to be more of a look what you've done sort of situation. But if you can regulate yourself to be able to show them how to regulate and show them that we can communicate in a calm way, then we're teaching them at the same time.
Sure. Absolutely. Role modeling is really, really important. I just want to tweak a couple of things that you said there. The first thing is we don't want to take away people's emotions by saying anger's not an okay feeling to have, or, what sometimes people deem to be negative emotions. We kind of say pursuit of happiness, people should always be happy and so forth. But the reality in life is, in fact, the reality in a day is we may have many emotions as the day progresses. But what we want to be able to do is to help people to feel things, even if they're big feelings like anger, and to articulate something about the feeling that makes it clearer to the person you're speaking to what it is you need at that moment.
Yeah.
So I can say, I'm really angry with you. You shouldn't have done that. It's so unfair. Now, that's very different than me going, you effing sod, get the out of here. So one is more regulated and one is dysregulated. So there's something about not saying that we can't have these emotions, but can we hold these emotions in a way that allows us to still let the world know what it is we need at this moment?
I think, Gregory, I think with that, we've in our home we have an elevation of speech. So we always say that you can know when we call it the jungle, when we're going into the jungle, and the teachers use that as well, and it sort of works in the way of it sort of invites them to know what jungle moments are like. And in the jungle, everybody has to be able to have a talk and have a talking stick and express their feelings together. So we create a jungle of peace as well, not a typical jungle where monkeys are swinging from trees and that sort of behaviour. But it works in our house, and we transferred that onto school, and it works at school. There's a lot more discussion in the classroom. So yeah. But our elevation of speech.
Because it's interesting, because when you first said jungle, I thought you're using a sort of negative. You're in the jungle and you're going crazy like a lion or something. But in fact, what you're saying is the jungle can be a safe place.
Yeah,
it can be a place you can go and talk together and sit down. And it might sometimes be a bit overwhelming, but together we can sort of work it out. Look, and the big thing about why it's important to regulate emotional states is that we are beings that like to communicate, and when communication's not clear, we often get a bit befuddled. we're not sure what to do, and or as an adult, even with a child who's not communicating clearly, whose emotions are very big and are out there or they're withdrawing, we have a tendency to get a bit defensive, such as go to your room and when you can calm down, then you can come and talk to us, or working really hard to sort of pull a person out of them withdrawing and say, come on, you need to talk to me now, come on. There's no point in going all sulky, etc. And we don't want that as a response. We absolutely want to set the scene by showing children, young people, that you can have big feelings, but you can also be clear in your communication about what you need. And of course, the worst thing is if we don't learn to regulate our emotions, we might do things in inappropriate places that, of course, get us in trouble. Although I do have to say that I've only been to one football match since I've been in Australia, which is, I'm sorry, it's a terrible thing to say. I'm coming from New Zealand, we tend to watch rugby, but I went to this football match. It was in Tuesday, I was in the army at the time, it was 1980, and it was a Tuesday night game out at Waverley when they used to play games at Waverley here in Melbourne, in Victoria. And I spent most of the night watching a woman who I'm gathering she was sort of mid-80s, maybe a bit longer. I've never heard anyone use so many expletives. Every expletive in the English language you can imagine she used against the ref. She was swearing and cursing at that ref. Now, she had really big feelings and she was not regulated. And the worst thing was, by the end of the session, she was exhausted. So if you don't regulate your emotions, you can become terribly exhausted by the end of the football game and get into some serious trouble. So jokes aside, what we want to do is, of course, help children to develop emotional literacy. And emotional literacy basically is recognizing feelings. I have a feeling. Naming that feeling. I feel X, sad, irritated, frustrated, angry, lost, etc. And then being able to respond to those feelings, I will do Y. I'm feeling angry, so I'm going to go for a walk. Now, when kids are little, they need an adult around to sort of come up with the action part very often. I'm angry. Let's go for a walk and talk about that. Tell me about why you're angry. Well, let's go out and bounce a ball or whatever it happens to be. But emotional literacy is first helping kids to recognize feelings, because some children have experienced trauma. If they've been in a household where feelings weren't allowed and therefore they've pushed these feelings down, they may not recognize feelings. And so the comment someone said before about role modeling, it's okay for adults to say how you're feeling, but just be careful when you say it that you own it. You don't want to be saying, you make me angry. Because what you're doing is you're putting a lot of expectation on that child and pressure on that child that it's your fault. You're to blame. We don't want that. There's a big difference between you make me angry and I'm feeling a bit angry at the moment. And that was my favourite glass. Maybe we need to talk a bit about what's going on. So there is a difference between these two things. And the reason we need to regulate emotions is it's very easy for us to get caught, and for children and us as adults, to get caught in what's called Cartman's trauma triangle. So here's Cartman's trauma triangle. You have three people. They can be groups of people, they can be even organizations, but we'll talk about individuals. We have the victim, and let's just, for this exercise, assume that the victim, in this case, to begin with, is the child in your care. And I'm not talking about victim because they've experienced trauma. They've come into the house after school and they've thrown a chair and they've stomped through the house, and you've offered them some afternoon tea and they sort of push the plate of biscuits aside. Now, at that moment, rather than declaring what's happening for them, they're sort of going, look at me, it's not fair, the world's hopeless. Now, what tends to happen, if you have a victim, the victim goes looking for two people, a rescuer and a persecutor. Now, you as the carer might become the rescuer or the persecutor. If you're the rescuer, what you do is you collude with the child against the persecutor. Now, let's imagine a child's come home from school and they've spoken to you and said the teacher at school has given them a detention, as an example, because of inappropriate behaviour. And the detention might have been home. They've come home, they've had to do extra schoolwork. And they say that it's not fair, that teacher always picks on me, you know, I hate them and so forth. And you as the rescuer go, that teacher is so bad. Oh, look, it's terrible. I agree with you. They're not very nice. How could they give you extra homework? So you've colluded with the child against the teacher. And what it does is it reinforces the child's belief that, yes, poor me, everybody's against me. Now, this can happen. You, the carer or worker, you can end up as the victim. And the persecutor is the child. And so the child is stomping around the house and you go, oh, they're always like that after everything I've done for them and I've opened up my house and given them everything. Why can't they be grateful? And say you're a carer and your caseworker comes to visit and you're saying this, you're complaining about the child, and the caseworker goes, yeah, that child, oh, I knew they would amount to nothing but trouble. Oh, we should have given them to another carer, you know, and they collude with you against the child. You see, you don't want this, because when you get into Cartman's drama triangle, it sucks the energy out of everybody. And it's like having everybody goes to their corners.
It's like being in the
Victim
jungle.
rescuer over there, persecutor over here. And so when there are these big emotions and this energy in the space, we have to guard against that, because this is when it gets set up. And what we want to do is create something different. We want to create the survivor thriver, you know, the child not being a victim, but being a thriver. I'm going to grow, I'm going to thrive. The carer or worker being a coach. Come on, you can do this. We can all do this. And the challenger is a person. It might be a respite carer. It might be a supervisor, whoever it happens to be, becomes a sort of, we used to call it, what was it called? I can't remember the phrase. It's called, I'm being the devil's advocate. The devil's advocate. The challenger, the person says, well, let's just be clear about this. Let me throw something in here. And you do it from a very genuine place. I just want to throw something in here to both of you, to the coach and to the thriver. You know, is this appropriate? Should this child be allowed to stay up until midnight, even though they're only 4 years old? And the coach goes, maybe not. And the thriver goes, you sort of ask, the challenger says to the child, you know, do you know anyone else your age who stays up till midnight? No. So, okay, well, let's rework this and see how we go. So in order to build this emotional literacy, we want to do it so we don't get caught up in this place. Now, does anybody know, oops, not there yet. Does anybody know how you build emotional literacy? We've got one person who already said via role modelling, and that's a most important one. Role modelling is critically important. But what other ways can we build emotional literacy?
Encouraging the children. Oh.
Encourage them to do what?
To name their how they're feeling. You know, I've got a whole lot of little faces that with names on, angry, happy, and they go pick it out of a box. Now I feel like this right now, and he'll give me about 3.
Love it. I say,
yeah.
So it's not just encouraging. What you're doing is you've got a sort of an activity that focuses on feelings, and that's wonderful, and that's spot on. And what we want to do is we want to repeat. And there's lots of activities we can use to create sort of emotional literacy. Another one you can do in the household is everyone takes photos of each other as sort of a headshot, so you can see the face, and maybe pick 4 to 6 emotions: happy, sad, angry, confused. Take the photos, put them in a plastic sleeve, and on a piece of card, write separate cards, write each feeling and put them in the plastic sleeve and put them somewhere on a wall. And each morning when people wake up and come into the room, and adults do it too, children do it, you encourage them to pick out the face that represents who they are now and the name that's associated with that face. You do it each morning. And when they come home from school, you do it again. Are you still the same or are you different? And you get adults to do it. So everyone's in on it. And what you find over time, you do it day after day after day, week after week. And people, then you say, well, let's not have it. Let's just talk, use our words to tell us. When you get up in the morning, hey, Johnny, how are you feeling? And Johnny doesn't have to necessarily say the words. He could even enact the words. You make it a little bit of fun, whatever it happens to be. And you repeat, and the repeating is critically important. Does anyone else have any other activities they use to build emotional literacy?
Gregory, a repair plan.
Can you tell me more about that?
So once we've got these little magnets and they've got all different emotions on them on the fridge. So we do that all throughout, like, you know, the times when things are tough and also when they're not, but also being able to ask the little fellow what can be repaired, like what's the repair plan after this if we're feeling this way and we're stuck in it for a bit. And generally we like to do pot planting. So we can go and talk about what it is, but whilst doing an action, like whilst doing like the pot planting, and those little herbs from Woolies were great at the time. We did that.
Oh, I love this. Yeah, great idea. And you may not know, but what you're doing is you're also doing neurological reparative work, because those big feelings the child might have, and they might have flipped their lid, and you're inviting them to get into an activity. Now, what activities do from a neurological point of view is they start to externalize. So when we have big feelings, we tend to internalize our experience. We go, oh, I hate this feeling, you know, we're doing, it's all inward, even though we might explode outward. But when you give an activity, it brings the mind from this place, and it slowly starts bringing the child back into the thinking mind. Because even doing a little bit of stuff like gardening, you have to use your mind to think about, what am I doing? Am I weeding? Am I pulling this out? Am I putting that in? And so forth. And when you're in that space, as you're saying, once you're back in the space, you can then talk about what's going on. That's exactly what we want to do. Love that. Anybody else? Any other activities? There's one other I can give you for really small kids, and I mean sort of before 5, although you could use it for even. During story time, there's a series of books called, I think they're called I Am Feeling. And they're just like a storybook. And they tell a story about someone feeling angry or jealous, or I'm feeling love, or whatever it happens to be. I think there's about 8 in the series. That's a great way, if you're going to read books at night, if you can find a book that's serving 2 purposes, that is engaging, it's a story, but also is teaching a child about feelings and what to do with them and how to express them, then you're absolutely on a winner. Any final things before we move on?
We've done quite a few different programs through occupational therapy, and with Zones of Regulation, we actually have the charts up on the wall and the pictures, and they can match. They've got Velcro on them, so they match the pictures to the emotion on the wall. But we also play match and snap and lots of kind of card games with them as well.
Yeah, great.
And
great.
they've done Secret Agents, and that's got a computer program. So children particularly enjoyed that, because it's got video clips, but it's got emotions where they match the emotions, similar sorts of things, but electronic. So that got one of the older kids into looking at emotions and identifying them.
Right. And do you know how you just kind of tell the emotional age of a child, whether they be chronologically 17 or 10 or 5 or 2? How do you tell the emotional age? Because very often, as I said, these children developmentally aren't meeting the milestones we might expect. You know, we expect kids emotionally and physically to sort of hit milestones as they travel along, boom, boom, boom. But sometimes physically they're sort of going like this, but emotionally they're not in the same place. How do you work it out? What's the telltale sign?
I don't know.
Watch them when they're under stress,
Oh,
and see how they respond to stress. So if you have a child who's in a stressful situation, and I don't mean just sort of average day-to-day stress, you know, they've been overwhelmed by something, so sort of high level of stress, do they go on the floor into a fetal position? And if they do, say they're 13 years old and they sort of start, and they get into a fetal position, what are we learning about them? What's their emotional age?
They're in a baby age.
Yeah, they're a sort of infant toddler. And so when we're putting in place an intervention, we might want to think about what would we do for an infant or toddler if they were doing that, rather than going, hey, you're 12 years of old, get off the floor. Now, of course, if we thought a baby needed soothing and they're 12 years of age, and you think, it's truth, they weigh 50 kilograms, how the hell am I going to, you know, oh, here we go. It's a bit hard. So you have to work out, well, what would be a soothing behavior? And it might be you have a swing, a trampoline. There's other things you could, depending on the weather. Queensland, you may not do it. Hot water bottle, a blanket around them. Now, anything that sort of creates this idea of soothing at that moment when the child is like this. Hot chocolate. So think about the emotional developmental age of the child when under stress, and that will give you some clues about the work, the disparity between their sort of physical chronological age and their emotional age. I was getting muddled up with my hands because the camera's in reverse. It's like being a dentist. If I was a dentist, I'd be able to do this. I'll know which hand is which. Trying to mirror. So let's move on to homely environment. So R is regulating emotional states. So part of the work you do as a carer and workers to support the carers is you have to ensure that your child is learning to regulate their emotional states. But remember, it doesn't mean you don't have feelings. Rather that you're in control of those feelings rather than those feelings being in control of you. Oh, and one other little activity you can do, it's called the boss of feelings. You can talk to a child, a younger child, 3, 4, even 7 and 8. You can do it with some adolescents, depending on whether they buy into it. And you talk about the notion that whether their feelings are being the boss of them or they're being the boss of their feelings. And you can introduce it at some point. It could be doing dishes and you say, look, I've just heard this idea about feelings. I don't know if you agree with it, but I've heard sometimes people are the boss of their feelings and other times feelings become the boss of them. You say, Cami, when's the time that you were the boss of your feelings? And when's the time that your feelings were the boss of you? And if they're not sure, you can maybe tell your own story. Well, I remember the other day, I got really frustrated and I knocked over a book and I stomped my legs. My feelings became the boss of me. And then express another time when I was feeling really angry. But you know what? I felt like breaking a cup, but I didn't. And I said to Harry, I'm really angry that we cannot win Tats Lotto, or whatever happens to be. But the idea is you're demonstrating being the boss of feelings rather than the feelings being the boss of you. So homely environments. Homely environment. A homely environment is one that on the first step across the threshold delivers a message that you have arrived in a safe, warm and holding place. Now, I don't know about you, when you've had a hard day out somewhere, whether it be at the office or just out in the world, and you get out of your car or walk home and you unlock the front door and you open that door and you take a step in. I hope that when you take a step in, you go, I've arrived. Now, of course, if there's 10 kids in your house and you open the front door and then you get everybody running towards you, the experience of might be quite short-lived. But the idea I hope you understand when I'm talking about this is it's so important when you sort of walk into your home, there should be a sense of that, I've arrived in a place that is safe. If you're stepping over the threshold into your house and you find your anxiety is going up, something's not right. You should be stepping across the threshold, and stress and anxiety should go this way. And this is what we want for children. And how do we do that for children? Somebody tell me, how do you think you create, and what is a homely environment that allows children, these are children in care, to walk into your home and have that experience? What do you think you need to put in place?
Their belongings, Gregory, and also photos on the wall. And here we have a thing where we like to take everything outside that's tricky. So we can, like, back to the gardening and you know, the scooter and stuff like that. And the home is our calm place. So when tricky feelings are happening, we just don't even have to go far, just step out the front door or the back door, and we talk about them outside, or at bedtime if we're reading a story. But we like to, we've got his artwork around as well from school, so that the things are like in the lounge room that he's done at school, and make things very sort of homely that way.
Yeah, I love this. So you've allowed him to have some space in the house.
Yeah.
Whether that be not just him physically, but other things that might be important to him. And, you know, often in families with their own children, we put up their artwork and we put photos up of them because we're proud. And so we want to demonstrate to these children that we are proud. And rather than separate it out, you know, here's photos of my biological family to the right and kids in care to the left. In fact, it's the other way around because I've got that thing mixed up again. But you see my point. We don't want that. We don't want separation. We want integration. And it's really important. Love that. Any other thoughts, ideas? And also just adding to that, when you do those sorts of things, remember the whole word of rhythm, you're setting a rhythm. You're setting the energy in the house to be of a particular type that help kids over time have this feeling. Anybody else? Nope. I'm going to move on. Last chance. So there are actually some other things. So what we need to understand is a homely environment is more than just a house, as was pointed out about putting pictures up. So we want to try and effectively use a whole lot of things to create a healing environment. And it's not just about, there's all sorts of things we can do. We have colours, the smells in the house, the noises and the sounds, the aesthetics, including lighting for different parts of the day. Interesting. I have been consulting at nights in carers' houses, and I come into the house and, oh, my eyes go like this because every light in the house is on and it's incredibly bright. And yet, if we think about nighttime as a time where we want people to wind down, we can do wonderful things to try and assist in that process, to let the mind know it's time to wind down. Such things as, instead of putting all the lights in the house on, use lamps to subdue the light. Use music to change the energy and the rhythm in the house. Somebody mentioned before about artwork and photos. House layout and accessibility. Now, some houses it's hard, but I often say houses where you can sort of help the child, encourage the child to say, you know, in different parts of the houses, we do different things. You know, this is where we eat. On this table, we eat together as a community, or if we're outside having a barbecue, we still eat together as a community. You might have a space. This is a messy space. This is where you can go hell for leather and play and do things. Now, we don't all have big enough spaces to be able to do this, but I want you to think about the layout of how you do things with the children in your care. Comfortable spaces. Do we have spaces where children can just check out a bit if they need to? An example of that would be having a square of carpet with one of those little harem-style tents where you can sort of see in, but kids can crawl into, and you might have some soft toys or a beanbag and some weighted toys where they can go in and just decompress. And touch. regarding both humans and objects. Now, touch is both problematic, of course, for children who come into care, for some children who come into care, not for all children, but for some. But touch can be really important to kind of stimulate all sorts of different feelings. And it could be physical touch between carer and child, whether that be high five, whether that be a cuddle and hug. Now, I know for some carers and for some workers, for our system, when we think about touch, we all get a little bit nervous. But we are human beings. And one thing we know about human beings, we're social and we like to touch. So we've kind of got to work out, how do we provide safe touch and good touch? And the other one in terms of objects. So one of the things we're talking about, emotional feelings, one of the things is we want objects that children can play with and fiddle with. And whether that be one of those slimy, squashy things, whether that be with those fiddlers, I've forgotten the name of them, the twisty ones, or whether that even be one of the therapy rooms in at Australian Childhood Trauma Group. We had this wallpaper put on one side that's kind of like, it has pimples on it. And so kids will come in and they'll put their head against it and they'll play with it with their hands and so forth. So I want you to think also about touch. The next thing is, homely environments is affected by energy carers, workers bring into the house. Now, I've talked about this before in earlier workshops about this notion of projection or transference, and I call it energy. That is, we take stuff that's inside us and we project it out into the world. And we do this in our houses, in our homes. If you've had a really bad day at work and you come in and you bring that sort of energy into the house, there's a good chance that particularly children in your care will absorb it, because they're very sensitive or alerted to situations where things may not be going so well for them. So have a little think about how you might shift the energy, even if you haven't had such a good day. And so I ask the question to you, if you've had a bad day, what are some of the strategies you have when you come back into the house? Not to get rid of the fact that you're a bit ordinary, but a way of ensuring that that energy is not going to be projected into the child in your care. Who's got some thoughts about that?
I asked the husband to give me 5 minutes, Gregory, just 5 minutes, and then I'll come back.
Love it. So a little bit of time out for yourself, or time in with yourself. Yeah. Yep, love it. And one thing you might do when you have that 5 minutes, you know, a couple of good things that I've found really helpful is, one, either have a shower and or change the clothes I was wearing that have been part of that energy. Oh, yeah. That can help to shift it. So you actually take off it feels like peeling off some of that energy. Get this stuff off, put it in the wash. Fresh clothes, or after I've had a shower. Don't always have to have a shower, but a shower can be helpful. And I'm refreshed. And so the energy I bring is going to be different. Anyone else have some other thoughts or ideas? Some other things people do: go for a bike ride, go for a run, do some exercise. Yep, somebody, great.
I actually have more for the other one, but I have found a lot of the children that come into my home are terrified of the dark.
Yep.
And I've got salt lamps in their bedrooms, so they stay on 24/7. They never go off, but they're never in the dark, and it makes them feel comfortable.
Sure, great. And if they do want to turn them off, then they're in control to be able to do that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I just hope the electricity bill hasn't gone.
No, it's not. They don't use a lot. Very, very minimal.
Like it a lot. Anybody else?
I was just going to say, for me, you know, obviously I don't have children in care in my home, but I work in the industry, and it's important when I walk through the door that my concentration is on my children. Sometimes that can be really hard. But one of the good transitions for me is my dog, because it doesn't matter if I'm out of the house for 5 minutes or an hour or 8 hours, she greets me with the most excited demeanour. She's a chocolate lab, and she just instantly puts me into a different space. And I think she has that effect on the children as well. If they've had a bad day, they walk in and, you know, you can't help but smile when someone's wagging their whole body. Yeah, so I think animals have a way of being able to transition us too.
Well, look, you're spot on, and of course I have Matilda, my therapy dog, but she does the same thing. And when I come home, or if she's been off to go to work with my wife, and she comes home and she runs in and she gets something, she brings me a present. It might be a slipper, or a toy or something, and she's the wagging, and we literally have. She's big enough. We'll have a cuddle. And spot on, animals are fantastic. If you haven't got an animal, just make sure your husband, or if your husband, your wife or partner, they can come in and they can do the wiggly thing just like the dog to make you feel. At least, I mean, sometimes you can do some crazy stuff because it does shift the energy in a house. Of course, you've got to have the sort of personality that allow you to do it. The reason for this energy stuff is so important is that trauma can release very destructive powers, and these must be countered through the development of safe, playful, and peaceful environments. Trauma can release very destructive powers, and they must be countered through the development of safe, playful, and peaceful environments. So I want you to think about is in your own environments how you create that safe, playful, and peaceful space. I always say, back to rhythm, adults need to set the rhythm. We can't have as an expectation that the child should. Adults need to set the rhythm. And when the rhythm gets all wonky, adults have to bring it back, not children, adults. It's not their job. Don't put it on them. One of the most wonderful things, a story I haven't told for a while, I heard, I think it was Archie Roach. So some years ago, I went to a place in Victoria in the Grampians, and they have a amazing museum. When I walked into this museum, it's Aboriginal Torres Strait Island. It's an Aboriginal Indigenous people museum from that area, and it's shaped. If you look at it, it's shaped like the hills. You see the building; it's the same shape as the Grampians. You know, I went in with my wife, and the first thing we came to was there was a television playing something, so I just sat there and listened. And it was Archie Roach telling a story, and he had both been in foster care and had been in a sort of, well, then it was an orphanage rather than. And when he was in the orphanage, when he woke up in the morning, he had to make his bed and then stand by the bed and wait for people to come and get him. And when he went into foster care, the very first morning, he woke up, he made his bed, got dressed, and stood out at the end of the bed. And the foster parent, and sometimes I cry when I tell the story, so because it gets me just touches on something. As the foster father was walking past, he saw Archie standing there. And he said, "Archie, what are you doing, mate?" So I'm just been waiting to be called for breakfast. And the father said to him, "Archie, in this house, you only need to attend to the kid stuff. So when you get out of bed, you can stay in your pajamas for your brekkie. If we're not up, either if you feel comfortable, we'll teach you to make your own breakfast, or you can wake us up and we'll come together and we'll make breakfast together. And then we'll look after your bed."
Oh.
Now, one of the most, what was important, the message, the power of the message that carer gave to that child, even to be Archie, is enormous. We want you to be a child. You do not have to grow up faster than is required. We just want you to be a child. And so part of setting the rhythm is to let these kids know, and I don't care if they're 1 or 3 or 7 or 12 or 17, your job is to be the child or the young person. You don't have to be the parent. We will be the ones to keep you safe. We will be the ones to set the rhythm in this household. You can participate and be involved and give your opinion about how we might do that in different ways, but we'll be the ones to lead, to be the captain, the ship, or the driver of the school bus. Any questions about that? Or comments or thoughts?
I just think that brought a tear to my eye as well, Gregory, and I just think, the importance of those early messages and, setting that rhythm that you speak about, but also, yeah, just the impact that would have had on that child in that moment.
Huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Enormous. Absolutely. Well, one of my favourite things is food. And sometimes we don't think of the importance of this in children's lives. Well, we might with our own children, but when your children coming from care, if we're going to work holistically, we have to think about food also, because we're building body, mind, and spirit. And so one of the parts of building body, but also helping to build mind, because we know we need fuel to learn and to play, is we have to think about yummy food. Like all living beings, we require energy to live. Food gives us this. The correct amount of energy throughout the day ensures we maximize our ability to function and, above all, to learn and play. However, beyond this, food is also a celebration of life itself that brings people together in community. Now, I think this can be a vexed issue for some children coming into care, because maybe they never had an opportunity to really experience good things. Now, I'm showing you these photos simply to show you this was a fridge. I was in a residential house doing an assessment of the house, and I was shocked by what I saw in the space that I'm showing you. I'm going to show you from photos from this particular residential house. Even a fridge, when a child goes into it, should be there with sort of abundance. They should never come to a fridge and think, oh, there's nothing there. They should see abundance. And they should be able to, when they're hungry, be able to eat. Now, what they eat, of course, we want to have some impact or influence over, rather. But this particular house was not giving off messages of abundance and health at all. It was showing sort of sterile emptiness. This is the one house. And so what I say to carers is you need to think about what you have available for children, because these children come into care very often can be picky eaters. They can overeat, they can undereat, almost starve. The other thing you need to understand about food is that certain foods release energy slowly, and some, like sugar, release energy very quickly. Understanding how energy is released in food can help you think about what sort of food do I want to give my child and when. Now, for any of you who don't know about this idea of GI index, I'd invite you to Google it. Just put GI index for food, and it will tell you about the sorts of foods, list of all the foods available that either have a high or low GI. As an example, when a child goes off to school and they're going to have to do some learning, we prefer to give them low GI food because it's going to release slowly over time. If you give high GI food, they might be okay for the first hour, but then all of a sudden they get really hungry and they need more food. And so we can control even children's partly emotional states through the sort of food that they might have. Now, I can't go into all the detail, but I just want to plant the seed about that. Sorry, I just want to plant the seed about this. And for those of you who take children to fast food places very often, just have a wee listen to this.
There's been a new thing is I've started to have like some chest, not chest pains, but like pressure. I feel like I got pressure on my chest. So I figure that's probably not a good thing. But neither's eating all this. I tell you, I haven't smelled bad yet. Yeah. I know I haven't. You just don't smell bad stuff. You know. Look at that fish fillet. Look at this thing.
Oh God, that looks nasty, man.
Isn't that horrible?
Obviously, that was fisted around all day.
That, the fillet of fish.
Oh, shit. I get the double quarter pounder with cheese value meal.
Okay, thank you. 486.
Real good today. Not that I feel sick, but I just feel really depressed. You know, for no reason. I mean, things are going great. I've had a good day. I just feel really, yeah. It's not real hard eating this food all the time. Just because, you know, it tastes good. It makes you feel good. I really noticed I'll eat some and just a little while later, I'll be hungry again. And I want more. More. I'm pretty bored with their menu. It only took me 9 days. But it's pretty good otherwise. 9 days.
Do that again.
How many's the question?
Yeah.
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 It's always the how many. Yeah.
It's just one from now, yeah.
Just one?
As soon as I got my first car, that's the first place I came to. I bought 3 Big Macs, ate them out there. Enjoyed them so much, and I came back about 5 o'clock at night, bought 3 more, ate them out there. Came back around 11 o'clock before they closed and ate 3 more. So the first day I came here, I ate 9 Big Macs, and it was like I couldn't get enough hamburger at that time, and Big Macs are so good. So I ate 265 in the first month.
How many do you eat a day usually?
Usually it's 2 a day. Okay, now last year I ate 741 last year. Okay, well, that's more than 2 a day. So that means there's days I had 3, but that's because they're getting smaller. It's probably 90% of my solid diet is probably a Big Macs. That parking spot, that's where I asked her if she wanted to get married. I mean, this place is special, a lot of reasons, you know. I had one Whopper in my life.
Yeah.
1984, guy gave me $5 to eat a Whopper. So after I ate the Whopper, took my $5 over to McDonald's, got some Big Macs. I always make fun of people at work, you know, saying, I don't gain weight. I said, well, you should try the Gorski diet. Yeah, oh, yeah. They don't like that.
They don't like that.
Man, this is a perfect sandwich, you know. At least for me, it is.
There it is, bite number 19,000.
You know? The wife says when she's got to put them in a blender, it ends. You know, that's what she told me.
Smoothies.
Yeah.
For those of you who haven't seen that, it's from a video called, I think it's called documentary called Upsize Me, that was made some years ago, and the documentary maker ate Big Macs completely, breakfast, lunch and dinner, for a month, and then they filmed what happened to him in that time. And the John Lennon lookalike guy basically eats Big Macs all the time, and they were celebrating he had eaten 19,000 of them since he started doing it. Now, I'm not trying to say, poo-hoo, you should not give kids fast food at all. But we should be mindful that very often children will default, particularly children who there's an association who have experienced harm, will default towards salty or sweet foods and to fast foods, fish and chips, McDonald's, KFC, all those sorts of things. And they do become more easily addicted to it. As the guy that, I've forgotten his name, Don, I think it was his name, he looks like John Lennon to me. As he was saying, you know, he had 9 the first day because he ate the first one and he got hungry, and he ate the next one and got hungry. Now, I've been with children in care, I've taken them out, and 9 times out of 10, maybe even 10 times out of 10, and I say, where would you like to go and eat? I'll say KFC, McDonald's, some fast food place. 2 children I used to, in a sense, mentor, they're now in their 20s. When I met them they were about 6 or 7. they did this, and I said, look, before you go anywhere, the only thing I won't do is I won't take you to fast food joints. And I introduced them to normal cafes, and it took probably about 3 or 4 months before they felt comfortable sitting in a cafe. In my case, it was here in Fitzroy and Brunswick Street in inner city Melbourne, which is an eating street in Melbourne. But when they did that, something shifted. Even in their maturity, here they were in a cafe doing what sort of other people do in families. So one of the things I won't do is give in to a child when they demand. So if they're demanding, I want fast food, I want this, I want that. My answer is I'm sorry, but we can't do that right now. When they're less demanding, or I want to have a surprise or do something special, then we might do something like that. So I'm interested for you to think about, but also to share your experiences of dealing with children coming into your sphere of influence, into your care, and dealing with food, because it can be a very vexed issue. What's it been like for you?
My guys are happy now to go out to a tavern or a restaurant and have their birthday dinners, which when they're allowed to. And they love that. They pick where they want to go. And some of them have been amazing with fantastic food.
Right, well done. Yeah, you can again, you're shifting the rhythm. You're just changing the rhythm. It doesn't have to be the way they come to you with a particular rhythm, and what you're doing to try and encourage both a more positive lifestyle, but also neurological reparative work, is just shifting the rhythm a little bit by little bit. It doesn't have to happen all overnight, but just with these little things that we're talking about, you can put in place, you begin to shift the rhythm. Anybody else?
We've been on a very long journey, and the children that are in my care came from an incredibly restrictive diet where there was probably only about 4 foods they actually would eat. So we've had a lot of food therapy, and we're now at the stage where we can all sit down together at the table and eat together. We're very stressed at that, and we can go and, you know, it doesn't matter where we are, we can find food that everyone will eat now. So it's been amazing progress. But I actually,
how long did that take?
We're 4 years.
So remember, you can't hurry the river. Change takes time. And when you understand that, it's actually can be a bit more relieving when you go, okay, it's going to take time. I'd like it to be overnight, but it's not going to happen. If you keep thinking it should be overnight because I'm giving them all this love and so forth, then you kind of set yourself up to fail and others. So I'm glad you didn't. Well done. Absolutely well done. Any other comments?
Gregory, we're only 2 years and our 4-year-old is still struggling with food in the sense of he doesn't know when he's full, and he will continually eat to the point where even when he goes to daycare, he'll sit there and eat 4 oranges. Like, we're still trying to work out, like at home, we try to allow him to eat, but also keep it to what a 4-year-old should eat, or slightly over what a 4-year-old should eat. But we're still struggling with how to help him in this area.
So a few things about this. Remember setting the rhythm. So sometimes setting the rhythm means you have to be the parent who says, that's it. Next meal is whenever. You can have a piece of apple. Now, in this case, I wouldn't put 10 apples out. I'd put 1 apple. And if it's there, it's there. But you will have to be the regulator for him because he hasn't learned how to regulate. And we know who are the people who can't regulate. What developmentally, where is a child who can't really regulate food intake? What age group? Anybody?
Infants.
Infants, pretty much. You know, you give infants, particularly if it's sort of, I'll just keep on going. So we have to be the regulator. So as the person before said, it took them 4 years to get to where they are. So you're 2 years in, it might take you another 2 years.
We have the same issue as well, Gregory, where the children I have will still, I feel, overeat. And so I know we've had enough. That's all there is today, but there's more in the food, and just providing that reassurance that there's still plenty of food. We're going to eat that food again, and yeah, we can have it another day.
I think that's
there's other things. Keep it. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, for us, it's that constant having to be on and be in the know. You've had enough. You can have. We'll put it in the fridge and you can eat it tomorrow, kind of thing. It's that constant trying to just be on with them all the time. I think, and I feel like sometimes I crush his soul, but I know I'm doing it for the right reason. But it just feels overwhelming at times because you just don't know how to connect with him in those moments to get him to understand that you're doing it for the right reasons.
So here's the thing. A couple of things. Blue tongue lizard interventions, one, which we talked about in another presentation. You may be responding to the wrong thing. It may not be about the food. Remember I said before, we don't just want to go do the doing. And if he's saying, give me an orange, and I'm saying, no, you can't have an orange, you've had enough. You might stop engaging in that narrative. And so what that would look like, he says, I want this, I want cake, I want blah, blah, blah. And you go, is that a blue tongue lizard over there? And you walk out the door and look for the blue tongue lizard. Or he says, I want food. And you say something like, I feel like blowing up some balloons. Oh, I'm going to start blowing up balloons. So in other words, you don't respond to that part unless you can determine what's below that. So in other words, if he's going, I want food, if that's his way of connecting with you, saying, I want connection, then I'll give connection, but I won't give food. And if you're not sure what it is, then you might need your caseworker or some other specialist who can sit with you and just sort of work through that. And if you haven't seen the workshop, you have to have a look at it. I think it might have been the last one. It's online. Is rather than doing, we start with what do we see? What are the feelings associated with what we see? Demanding food. What are the feelings associated? Maybe fear that I'm never going to have enough, I'll miss out. What's happened to this child? Child's come from a deprived environment where they were neglected. What's my intervention? Okay, I'm going to help the child to learn about what fullness is like, etc. So there's ways to work through it. We won't get to do it completely today because I'll need to move on, otherwise we'll run out of time. But I want you to start thinking of those lines, and whoever your caseworker is, or if there's a therapist involved, is to ask them to help you to just think through so you can get to a place where you sort of better understand what is the meaning of the behavior, because he or she is communicating something to you, and I don't think it's about the food. It might be about, I'm fearful that I'll never have enough. But the intervention for I'm fearful I may never have enough is not give more food. We need to move on to therapeutic change plans, TCPs. And I spoke about them again a little bit, I think it was last week. But bottom line, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Workers and carers must know in detail daily what aspect of a child's development or healing is being attended to. Now, we do this incredibly poorly as a sector across the whole of Australia.
Okay.
Oops, so my watch is talking to me. We do it poorly because we don't base our sort of monitoring on developmental milestones. And we should. You would have done it with your own children. Your infant, when they were born, they would have been weighed, and you would have taken them to a paediatrician or a child nurse, and every month or 2 months you would have checked in, and they would have weighed and measured circumference of their head, done all that kind of stuff, and checked in with sort of are they sucking, hand-eye coordination, all those things. We should be doing this with children in care on a regular, and by regular I mean weekly, well, monthly at very least, but if not weekly, saying, is this child meeting their expected developmental milestones? If not, what are they? And if we know they're not meeting them, what activities can we do to meet them over time? Remembering change takes time. Can't hurry the river. So the sort of complex version which I shared last time is that we say, what's the first thing? What are we wanting to change or develop? So in the example before of the food, child who eats a lot, what are we wanting to change? Well, we're wanting them to maybe not eat so much, to know when to stop eating, to know when they do feel full. The other one, just about that case, one of the things I'll be asking my mind is, the child might have high anxiety, and unfortunately for them, as the case with me, when I have anxiety, it feels like hunger. I have it in my stomach. And so I can eat, oh, this is nice, I'll eat some more, I'll eat some more. And then I realize, hold on, I'm not hungry, I'm anxious. Stop eating. And that's a complex thing to work out. So the first thing we do want to ask, what is it we're trying to change? What development milestone do you want to strengthen? Again, if we use that example, is it a developmental milestone is knowing when you're full, physiologically knowing when you're full? Is it being able to have more emotional literacy so that the child can say, hey, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling anxious, rather than I just eat food? You've got to work that out. And your caseworker should be helping you to do this. What activities would strengthen this developmental milestone? In other words, what are the things we're going to do again and again and again, and repeat, 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 repeat. And I would invite you, when you've finished today, in the next few days, is to get a piece of paper and just do a little bit of a list. Our child is 12, our child is 5. If I think about the developmental milestones for that age group, if you're not sure what they are, go onto Google and say, what are the developmental milestones in Australia for children who are 5 or 12? And you get a list of them. And just do a checklist. Have they met this one? Have they met this one? Have they met? Oh, no, they haven't met that one. If they haven't met it, okay. This is one thing we're going to work on over the next month or 2 months. We're going to develop, what are some activities? Again, if you don't know them, your caseworker doesn't know them, the therapist doesn't know them, go into Dr. Google. What are some activities you can do to strengthen this thing? Hand-eye coordination, or fine motor skills. And then do those activities and repeat them and repeat them. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, say, is the child getting better? Have they now met or are within a range of expectation? If not, keep doing it. If they have, do it less often. And how often we need to engage in these activities? Well, I just said that. That's a therapeutic change plan. It's not that hard to do. It just requires the will for carers and workers to do it and do it well. And of course, the question is, how will you know if your intervention is working? Well, it makes sense. Developmental milestones are improving. The child is not gobbling food and eating food. They're starting to say, oh, I'm not hungry, I'm anxious. Or, I eat food. Oh, I'm full now. I don't need any more food. And there will be food again later. I don't have to be fearful it's not going to be there. So I'm going to move on because I want to allow some time for questions at the end. But healthy body, mind and spirit. So we've kind of talked about some of these things as we've gone through the process of rhythm. But if one is let go, all others will feel the effects. So if you let go your mind, your body's going to feel it. Your spirit will feel it. You get, depressed. If you let go your body, your mind's going to feel, oh, I feel tired, I can't do this, I can't think straight, etc. If all are strengthened, they provide a foundation that infants, children, young people can springboard off to a healthy and fulfilling adulthood. Adults can role model healthy body, mind, and spirit. Now, this is a bit tricky for us as adults because some of us do not do this. Some of us might eat poorly, not do exercise to keep us fit, and maybe not take time out for ourselves to have a healthy spirit. And by spirit, I'm not thinking about in the sort of the religious sense, or it might be for some of you. But spirit is when I kind of feel connected and want to be connected to the world and people around me. Because we are, after all, social beings. So you have to think, and again, therapeutic treatment or therapeutic change plans can help us think about how can I strengthen the child's body? How do we get enough exercise so we're not sitting in front of the games and gaming all day? How do I strengthen the mind? Through learning, through playing puzzles and all those sorts of things. And how do I strengthen the spirit, ensure I'm encouraging a child to be involved and develop friendships and learn how to be with friends and how to be with adults and how to be in community. So you can start to see that with this rhythm, you know, love is not enough. It's just not enough. And so if we're developing the whole person, body, mind, and spirit, then these are the things we're doing. Developing mind, smart thinking. So helping a child to use their mind to solve problems. This is also to do with school, to do with academia, learning, reading, writing, arithmetic. If I get into strife, can I use my mind to get out of strife? You know, I wanted to snot that kid, I was so angry, but hey, mind says that's not such a good idea, you get in trouble, I'm not going to do it. Self-care. Self-care is about grooming, you know, being proud of how you look, learning how to wash and clean your teeth and do all those sorts of things, encouraging a child to do it at the appropriate developmental stage. Self-love is about learning to value, so this is about the spirit, learning to value yourself, your belief that you have a right to stand on this earth. You have a space. And it's most important, excuse me, these children learn to have a sense of value. And if you remember credits in the vase, which might have been the last one or the one before, go back and have a look. We want to do a lot of credits in the vase work, making sure we catch the child, even if it's just for a moment, even if it's just in between them doing terrible things, just in a moment they do something appropriate, we make sure we mark it. Because over time, when you get enough credits in the vase, you start to feel the sense of value. Cooperation. We want to encourage children to be involved, to cooperate. Now, cooperation doesn't mean a kind of tin soldier, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, anything you say. That's not cooperation. The cooperation is we giving and fair instructions, a child wanting to be involved because they want to. Internally, they say, I want to participate in this community that I'm living in. I want to add value to it. Empathy, a child learns to be empathic. And empathy is about how do I recognize pain or suffering in somebody else? Or recognize what another human being is feeling at some time. Cultural identity. So cultural identity, whether we're talking about Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders or children from a Vietnamese family or from a Sudanese family, it's not just putting a painting on the wall, whether it's a dot painting and saying there, Aboriginal, there we go, cultural identity. Cultural identity is you as adults embedding yourself in the culture of the child, learning about it, going out and eating, going to community days involving that child, bringing people from that particular culture into your home, into your life, so that they can be proud of that culture. Connectedness. We're talking about helping a child to learn how to be in relationships. That being connected and having attachments is critically important. And the final one, safety. Helping a child to make good choices around risk-taking behaviour. Now, children need to take risks. It's in our DNA. When I was an adolescent, took lots of risks. It's in our DNA. So rather than saying people stop taking risks, you want to encourage them to take calculated risks. So if they're climbing up somewhere, don't say, oh, don't do that, it's too high. Have a conversation. Okay, how are we going to climb safely? Let's do it together if you can climb safely yourself. But we're intending to ensure that they're not trying to harm others or harm themselves. The final one, before we go to questions, is maintaining the rhythm. That is, you as adults set the rhythm in the space. Practice rhythm is not an event, it is a process, a marathon rather than a 100-meter sprint. Change takes time, can't hurry the river. And as such, to be successful, one requires a daily regiment that focuses on the finishing line. Where am I trying to get to? This is why I'm doing this, because I'm trying to get to there on the finishing line, but recognizes the need to work in the here and now and in order to promote healing. So that's where I want to get, But in order to get there, I've got to focus here on just improving those little things, hand-eye coordination, gross motor skills, strengthen their bodies, help them to learn more quickly to go from being in their reptilian brain to come into their thinking mind. And you must do for yourself what you do for them. And this is the tricky bit sometimes for us as adults. If you're wanting to build the mind and the spirit and the body of a child in care, guess what? You have to build your mind, your body, and your spirit. And as carers, you have to have time for yourself. This is not about sacrificing, oh, I haven't got time, I'm too busy, I can't. You need to go out and do stuff for yourself. You need just adult time. Critically important. You have to fuel yourself up to be able to do this work. So the sort of care we give to a child, in some ways, we need to give that care to ourselves. And finally, as I said in the very first, I can't remember which one it is now, I'm sorry, which one was it? But ultimately, in order to put rhythm into place in your households, you have to remember, Dadiri.
Know me is to breathe. To breathe with me is to listen deeply. To listen deeply is to connect. It's the sound of deep calling to deep. Steadily, the deep inner spring inside us. We call on it. Calls on us. We are river people. We cannot hurry the river. We need to move with the current and understand its ways. Wait for the rain to fill rivers. Touch the earth. Watch out push birds and wait for them to open. We wait for our young people as they grow.
The young people.
The time for rebirth is now. If our culture is alive and strong and respected, it will grow. It will not die, and our spirit will not die. I believe that the spirit of Dadidi we have possible to grow, not just within ourselves, but in our whole nation.
Oops. Started it again, just bear with me a moment. Whoops, gave the one away. Okay, so what's the first thing that Miriam said that we need to do? And for those who've done this before, remember the okay, I'll give you the first one. It's got breath there, but it's breathe. So when you're trying to create a rhythm in the space, the first thing you need to remember is to breathe. What was the second thing? Listen deeply. Correct. Listen deeply, but not just about listening out there, but about listening inside. What's happening in me? Am I in a space that I'm going to be able to set the rhythm with the child in my care at the moment, or am I a little bit discombobulated and I need to get myself back into that place? Connect, building relationship, building a relationship, building a relationship. A lot of time spent by the things you do in your household to build a relationship with that child. And the final one to remember is you cannot hurry the river, change will take time. And I always use this statement to remind carers and workers, you don't need to fix things all at once. We work slowly, we set the rhythm, and we get moving. We know where the finish line is, and we work in the here and now. So the practice summary, well, it's not a long one today. Boom, rhythm, set the rhythm. You're the adults, set the rhythm in your households. We'll come to the end. You know, we can't leave these children's outcomes to chance. We just can't do that. We have to think about this as if you're the specialist nursing staff in the intensive care unit of hospital and you are giving them the finest of care possible. Love will only be there at the foundation and compassion, but the rest of those building blocks, that scaffolding you need to do is with rhythm, regulating emotional states, creating homely and safe environments, yummy food and healthy food, therapeutic change plans. So you have a plan, healthy body, mind, and spirit. And of course, then maintaining the rhythm, giving to yourself, caring for yourself in order to care for the children in your care. So that brings us to the end. That's it. We're done. 6. I want to leave just a few minutes. We've come close to the end. I'm just going to get out of this escape from here to come back to here, and I'll turn my camera back on here. Here we are. Here we go. Here we are. So any final questions, comments, statements, challenges?
Gregory, I just wanted to talk, just to give share a little story about the food. Yep. We had the same situation with our little guy, and he was scoffing his food and just like causing himself to near vomit. And we did some work with him, and we got some, therapists involved and stuff. And we brought it back down to just a simple conversation of when he has family time, everything is shared. And what he was doing was trying to get the amount of food first, because the adults were sharing from what he had. And so when we were, this was a long process. Yeah, and what we did was we gave him the opportunity of going to the fridge and being able to take what he wanted from the fridge and give him a job, because he likes to be the leader, of being able to tell us how much is left. So when he takes something from the fridge, like a popper, we like to only have one of those, one a day, not you can't go and have 3, but to give us an idea of what's left so that he can be in charge of like the shopping bill, like the shopping list. And that sort of gave him a little bit of a leadership role in that. And also we let him eat first, so that he was able to have what he had on his plate, and we brought our plates second to the table, and just really emphasize that we're not taking anything from the plate, that it's all his and his alone. And it worked really well.
Fantastic, well done. So you're able to understand a fear that he had and put some things in place in order to have that fear, rather him being able to manage that fear rather than it becoming overwhelming. Absolutely fantastic. Well done.
Does anyone else have any questions? I am mindful of time, so if you do need to go, that's absolutely fine. Like I said, this will be recorded, or has been recorded, and will be uploaded onto our QFKC website. But any other questions? No.
Just before you do say your thing, I hope I get to come up to, it's been a horrible 2.5 years not being able to be in a room with people. I hope there's an opportunity sometime in the future to be in Queensland and to be with you all in a real space. So we can work together.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
On behalf of Queensland Fostering Kinship Care and all the carers and departmental workers and agency workers that have linked in today and in the previous 6 or 5 webinars that we've had, we just want to say a huge thank you to you, Gregory. Gregory has volunteered his time and it's just been incredible in terms of the amount of knowledge. And the beauty is, this being on our website, carers can continue to learn and it's going to be a resource available for, years to come. So, on behalf of QFKC, I really wanted to say thank you. And I think my take home from today was just love that holistic approach to the way in which we think about trauma and we respond to trauma. And I remember many years ago when I attended one of your workshops and I used the scenario when I do some training around trauma, and when a child is in a car accident and they are in the hospital and they've got a brain injury, we don't have nurses and doctors, that are keeping the things, the diagnosis is close to them. They want to share the information so that we can actually respond to the trauma and to that injury, and to consider that trauma for a child as a result of harm has also resulted in a brain injury to a child. And so the care team absolutely needs to share information. And so, and what I took away from today, Gregory, is what you said about it takes more than love. So if we look at that other analogy, with that brain injury from the car accident, it's not just going to take love from the family and the friends and the medical professionals for that child to pull through. It's going to take a range of different interventions to actually help that child recover. And that is absolutely the same case for our children that have suffered trauma as a result of harm. So I love that analogy, and I'll keep using it now because now I've got a little thing to add on to that, that it takes more than just love. So on behalf of QFKC again, thank you. Okay, so if you just click back on Teams, note down here. Yeah. And click on there. So you just disappeared for a bit and my emails came back. Apologies for that. Thank you. And until next time. See ya.
See you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Recording, yeah. And then if